Have you ever been blindsided by a furious parent, or worse, publicly called out for something that you didn't even do? If you're leading a next-gen ministry, it's not a matter of if, but when. And if you don't know how to handle it, it could take you out. So today I'm going to share some real stories and a playbook for how to take the hits, stay healthy, and lead through it. Let's go. Hey everybody, welcome to the Brent Parsley Next Gen Leader Podcast. My name is Brent, and I hope that today's episode really helps you win in Next Gen ministry. I want to help you with the how of Next Gen ministry so that you can do all the stuff that matters most, like building relationships with kids and students and leaders and parents, discipling people and helping them follow Jesus. If you find this podcast helpful, I'd love it if you would subscribe to it on YouTube, give it a like, jump in the comments section, or leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice. It's really helpful. And I'd love to hear from you. What are the things that you're dealing with or thinking about? What would you like to talk about on this podcast? You can email me at brent@brentparsley.me, or you can DM me at brentparsley on Instagram. All right, today we're going to talk about how to handle criticism and what to do when criticism comes from an angry parent. Now, if you haven't experienced either of those things before, just wait, because I promise you it's coming. I once had a mom call my office and yell at me for like 15 minutes. Yell at me for 15 minutes because she'd heard that some kids were sneaking alcohol into our student meetings. Now, to tell you the truth, we had a lot of students coming, and I think there probably was some truth to this. See, we were in Colorado, and everybody in Colorado, they carried around an Nalgene bottle. If you don't know what that is, you can Google it. But it's mountainous there, right? It's high elevation. Everybody feels like some sort of a rock climber. So you just had an Nalgene bottle that you carried with you. And probably you were wearing a fleece vest at the time. So a few kids, apparently they were filling their Nalgene bottles with alcohol. I think honestly it was Zima. I don't know if you even remember what Zima is. It doesn't matter. But they're sitting in the back with their Nalgene bottles full of Zima, and they were having a little drink. It was not good. So we got into it. We took care of it. But she laid into me for a good 15 minutes saying that she was going to call the police and she was going to call the local news media just to tell them about how horrible that we were and the problem that we were to society. It was really fun. I once had a complete stranger leave a recording of one of my messages at the door to my office. He wrote a handwritten letter letting me know about all my heresies in that message and how I was leading people astray and how I needed to change. More recently, I had a couple parents get really mad because they thought that we didn't take good care of their daughter when she passed out at a camp. Even though we called them every step of the way and communicated about everything that was happening, they seemed really fine until another parent got involved. And that led to, a few weeks, maybe a month of emails and a meeting with a veiled threat at litigation. So that's just a few. And there's many more over the years. Here's the truth. If you're leading well, if you're leading and doing something meaningful, you will get pushback and you will get criticized. Criticism is just part of the deal. And it can come from any angle, right? Your sermons, your leadership style, your decisions, your email, your font choice, your logo, your camp theme, the brochure, your response time to a text, on and on and on. It can come from anywhere. And if you work with kids, sometimes the criticism was just downright mean. Like, your voice is weird. Your voice is too high. You have a big nose. Your head is really big. Your clothes are funny. We've all had those very specific remarks, right? Right? But if you don't have a healthy view of yourself, if you don't have a healthy view of God, of the church, of ministry, criticism and angry parents, honestly, it can be devastating. Listen, I used to spiral. I would spiral down hard when I would receive even a small bit of criticism. And if a parent was really upset at me, I used to put me out for like a few days. It consumed me, consumed my thoughts. And it just meant that I wasn't super healthy at the time. I was anxious. I was insecure. Honestly, a lot of my ministry was based out of fear. I performed out of the fear that something bad might happen, and I wanted to ward that off. And so what it actually made me really good at a lot of stuff, but it was killing me. It was limiting my effectiveness, and truthfully, it was just miserable. And if you're leading out of any of that today, I can guarantee that you're not leading your team, your volunteers, your kids, or your students very well. In fact, you might end up withdrawing from them or even lashing out when you receive some bad feedback. So we got to get healthy, and we got to learn how to deal with all of this really well. And you have to remember that parents are the number one influence in the life of a child or a student. So we don't get to decide that their criticism or their thoughts or their concerns just don't matter. We have to be on the same team and work with them. So How do we deal with criticism, and how do we deal with angry parents? Well, the first thing I think is to just realize that criticism is coming for you. So just relax. If you're leading at all, you will receive criticism. If you haven't had it yet, you're probably just new. Congratulations, your streak is about to come to an end. Even Jesus faced criticism during his time on earth, and certainly he's receiving plenty of criticism from people in our culture today. So if it's good enough for Jesus, well, so if you just accept the fact that you're not that special and you're not that bad, and everybody, including Jesus, receives criticism, you're going to do better when you get it. So you can't escape it. Join the club and just decide you're going to be okay with it. What matters is what we do with it. And I just want you to know you're going to be okay. This does not mean that you're a terrible person. It doesn't even necessarily mean that you did something wrong. So here's the first thing that I would say. Head off as much criticism as you can. And what I mean is think ahead. Think things all the way through. Be really great at your job. And what I really mean when I say that is you got to think like a parent. I've talked about this idea before, but if you think like someone who has a kid in your ministry, if you think like that kind of parent, you're going to make better decisions. My wife says, act like the parent is watching you right now. Act like the parent is in the room with you right now as you minister to their kids. Suddenly, it's not such a good idea to have that student jump off a cliff into the water below, not knowing what's really down there or how deep the water is. Suddenly, it's not a good idea to have that kid eat a bowl of hot peppers and sardines and crickets and earthworms. Most parents just don't want that for their kids. If you look at every message, every event, every game, everything that you do through the eyes of a parent, you're just going to get less criticism and far less angry parents because you already thought through all of the things they won't find funny and they won't find acceptable and really probably aren't good anyway. Really, what you're doing is you're building trust with them before the trouble comes so that when the trouble does come, you have some relational equity and you guys can hopefully have a much better and more fruitful conversation. So let's say that the criticism does come. Well, first thing you're going to do is you're going to consider the source. And I think you should use a scale to determine how you're going to handle it. Like, you don't have to and you shouldn't receive criticism from everybody equally, right? You probably know this. But you pay more attention to the dad who has 3 daughters in your ministry than, say, the troll who doesn't like your current series on Instagram, right? Those don't carry the same weight. So you weigh them out and you decide first how serious you're going to need to take this. And that scale is going to vary based on your context, but I imagine it starts with God first, and he isn't going to criticize, probably just convict if necessary. But then really it starts with your lead pastor, your oversight, those who are leading you and those people who are invested in your life and your development and ultimately are going to be responsible for your ministry. Then it's followed closely by the parents, most of who want you to succeed and do really well. And honestly, you got to believe that. Like, they want to be on your team. They want the best for their kids, so they want the best for you. They're not the enemy. But then the scale slides down, maybe to church people who aren't invested in you or the next generation or your ministry at all, and they've got opinions. Well, maybe I'll act on that, and maybe I won't. Then down to people like the guy who left that recording for me. No name, no contact info. It really bugged me. But if that happened today, I would just throw it away. It doesn't matter. This guy's not invested. He's not connected. So we do a similar thing with somebody who fills out a Connect card at our church with a complaint, but doesn't leave a name or a contact info. I'm just not going to deal with that. Look, I get it. They don't want to be mean. Maybe they don't want to be mean. But what we're interested in relationship. So if you're not going to be willing to stand up and be known with your opinions, we're not going to spend a lot of time dealing with it. So who is it coming from and how serious should I take it? And some you can just dismiss out of hand and go on with your happy day. But now let's say that it does come at you. You got the email. You got cornered in the lobby and it's for real. Well, what should we do now? All right, here's what I would say. Just listen, man. Just listen. If you're like me, you're probably already spinning and you're thinking about your response and how you're going to defend yourself. Here's all the reasons why you're wrong. Here's all the reasons why it's okay what I did. And so your defenses go up and now you're not even really listening to them anymore. So pause and listen. And don't just listen to defend yourself and make your point. Listen to understand where they're coming from. What really happened? Where are you coming from? Is there something else that's happening that is causing this? Like, what's really going on here? And ask some questions. Can you tell me a little bit more? Okay, so what really happened from your perspective? And just let them talk. Let them talk it out. Let them get it all out. You can validate their feelings about it, even without agreeing with their viewpoint. It is true that a lot of times people, they just want to be heard. They want somebody to listen to them, to what happened. So just don't cut that off. You'll do better. And as you're listening, I've heard people use, I think, the 3 Ps to kind of help you out. Here's what they are. They say posture. So watch your posture. It's easy to fold your arms and furrow your brow, lean back, try to keep your arms down instead, keep your posture open, and let them know that you are actually invested in this conversation. And then that's presence. So posture, presence. So you're actually there in the moment. You're really listening, not distracted, not looking for help somewhere else, not distracted by other things that are happening around them. You're not just trying to write your defense in your head. You are present with them, listening to them. And the third one is patience. So posture, presence, and patience. Give them the chance to talk all the way through. Okay, thank you very much. Is there anything else? And so once they've talked it all out, I would say, don't react now. Just respond. You probably heard that before, but our temptation is to gear up and to let them have it. Or we just want to react, especially if they were rude or they're coming hard at us. And I've had that plenty of times. So it's so easy to just give that same energy back, but that's not really appropriate. And honestly, it's not helpful. So do everything you can to pause and think about your response before you say whatever comes next. Typically, I'm going to respond with some form of thank you. That might seem a little crazy, but I'm not going to say, hey, thanks for yelling at me, or thanks for destroying my fragile sense of self today, but hey, thank you so much for caring so deeply about this. Hey, thank you for being so honest with me. That couldn't have been easy. Hey, thank you for helping us take a look at some things that we might be missing. Hey, thank you for your love and concern for kids and students at our church, something like that. So that's how I would start as my response instead of my reaction. And then really evaluate and own whatever you can. So now you got to evaluate it. You take a look and you decide if this is true or if this is really for you. Often there's something that you can learn from all of these incidents that happen. Not always, but often. Or is this something that I just need to let go and move on from? Maybe this isn't really real, or maybe this didn't really happen, or maybe I don't need to be too concerned about this. So even if it wasn't your fault or your problem, there's almost always something to own. Like, you know what? You're right about my tone. Or you know what? You're right about my communication. I do think that we could have done this one thing better. I agree with you. It wasn't your fault, but you're willing to own what you can and what you may have done. I heard someone say once that, okay, it's not your fault, but you can own 100% of the 1% that you do own. So go all in and own up to it. And then be aware that you might have a blind spot. Maybe it's true that you missed something. Maybe your plan wasn't quite as good as you thought it was. That's honestly okay. Don't be afraid to say, I'm sorry, we didn't do as good a job as we want to on this. So here are some changes that we're going to make next time. And sometimes, truth is, we are idiots. And we did the wrong thing. We made the wrong call. And that's the time to just fess up and say, I was wrong on this one, and I want you to know that I am sorry, and here's what I'm doing to make some changes immediately. And in some cases, like the mom who wanted to call the cops and the news on me, well, I knew that was a possibility. It was a large church with some influence, so I knew that she might follow through, and it could be a little problematic. So I hung up with her, and I called my lead pastor immediately, told him what happened, told him what I said, and he coached me on some things that I could do next. So he's going to need the chance to respond in some cases and give his input on your next steps. And he should never be surprised by something that's going down like that in your world. So make sure to keep him up to speed. Something that really helps me is when I consider why they might be criticizing me. Maybe they're hurt. Is there something else going on in their life that's causing them to respond this way? Are they having some kind of family issue or some kind of crisis? When I think about why and I realize what hard thing might be driving them, I just have some more compassion, and I find that it's really helpful. All right, so now you've listened, now you're owning some of it, now you got to decide what you're willing to act on. Some people don't realize this, but you don't have to act on all the criticism that you receive. If you messed up, you should apologize and you should fix it. But you don't have to do what everybody else wants you to do. You're the leader, so lead. God put you in your role. Your pastor empowered you to serve, so take heart, take courage, and go. My pastor would always say, don't solicit advice unless you're willing to act on it. So if I wanted to like poll parents and get some input, or I wanted to ask the elders or leaders or whoever about whatever issue, I have to be willing to do what they say. That's why I'm not crazy about random polls and questionnaires. Some people love it, but what happens is you get a bunch of people throwing their opinions at you, and then they get disappointed because you're not going to do what they said, and you asked them. So if you want some opinions, you got to narrow the choices down to the 2 or 3 things that you're willing to do, and then ask their opinion, a choice out of those 2 or 3. That's just good stewardship. I believe that's good leadership. But when you've received some criticism, now you got to decide what you're really willing to do. So I tell them the vision and the heart behind what we're doing, and that's what guides all of my decision making. And then humbly and firmly tell them what I'm willing to do, and then do that. And frankly, here's what I'm not really willing to do at this time, and so we're not going to do that. One key here is to know that you and your pastor are on the same page. So make sure that they're involved and they're updated on the conversation, and they know what decision you're going to make, and they're going to be with you. You don't want to stand firm on something and not have him in your corner. Our philosophy is honestly sort of always to say yes to something if we can. So the church isn't the staff, the church is the people, right? And if they have an idea or a thought or a need, maybe it's great. So we'll consider it, and we're going to try to say yes to them if we can. So a small instance. So for us, if a parent asks, hey, can my kid go with their sibling into the next grade up because they want to be together? So we'll say, yeah, absolutely. We will try it today. But I just let the parent know, well, let's circle back at the end of the day and let's find out how the kid did. Let's talk to the teacher. Let's talk to you, and let's just see how it went. If it's bad, we just won't do that again. But we're always willing to try. So just don't be so hard-nosed and firm and hard-hearted on your decisions. Maybe people have some good thoughts and good ideas. So try it. Try to say yes if you can. So now that you've communicated what you're going to do, always, and I mean always, follow up. If you're like me, sometimes you're just glad that it's all over. I don't love conflict, so I'm just glad it's done. So we had the fight, we had the big talk, I made the decision, I told them what's up, so now I'm just glad they're gone. Well, don't let that relationship slip away. The following week, send a text or send an email. Check in on them to see what's going on and how they're doing. Thank them again for the conversation and for the fact that they have so much care for their student or for your ministry. And then check in on the student or kid specifically if it involves somebody. And then maybe go one more time even. Send a final text in another week or so. Or stop them in the hallway. Or talk to them at checkout or check-in when they check their kid in. Let them know that you're good and your relationship is good with them if you can. All right, so that's pretty good. Let's just do a few quick thoughts here to close. So sometimes the criticism or the complaint comes through a text or email, right? Today, I think actually mostly it comes that way. So here's a few ideas to help you think that through. First thing, pause. Don't get to work typing right away. Don't just write down the first thing that comes to your mind. In fact, what you should do is open up a note on your phone or on your computer and write all your feelings out there. Pour it out, man. Not in a text that can accidentally be sent, but put it in a note or some other document. Your first draft is probably not going to be your best in most of these cases. So typically, I respond, again, with some sort of thank you most of the time. And then I'm going to try to find the nearest time that I can meet in person. Because you can't read a tone in text or an email. It's too easy for things to get misconstrued. And here's the reality. What you say and what you mean and what they hear are always 3 very different things. And it's even worse digitally. So when that family was mad at me about their daughter at camp, I responded a lot, honestly, through email, more than I should have, because the emails that I was receiving had some really outlandish things that simply weren't true. So I was responding to those quickly, and I felt like it was important to respond quickly to what was being said. But when we finally met, they had printed out all those responses, marked them down in red pen, highlighted them, and came in to pick them all apart one by one. So just don't do that. It's much easier to see somebody as a friend and not an enemy when you're sitting down face to face. So do not handle it digitally, handle it personally. And when it comes to in person and you're having the conversation in person, well, you can pretty easily follow, I think, all the steps that we've outlined above. But what you have to realize is you do not have to answer everything right now. In fact, it is wise to say, thank you for caring about this. I'm going to take a little time to process what you've said because it's important. And I want to talk to the pastor about this and make sure that we're all on the same page. And I will get back to you. So what's the best way to reach you this week? You don't have to answer everything right away, and you're going to have a better answer if you take the time to pray, to think about it, and to get wise counsel. And then what about when the criticism comes from you? Well, that's probably another episode. But here's what I've experienced. Over time, as you do this, you start to realize that the accolades that you sometimes receive in ministry and the criticism that come oftentimes, they're not nearly as important as they seem to be at the time. I recently had a youth pastor ask me about how I dealt with the desire to achieve and to build a platform and the temptation to want to build a platform for myself. And I told him, well, you know what? At one time, we had between 1,200 and 1,400 students coming during the week, middle school and high school. And so that was fun, but it wasn't fulfilling. It was never enough. I never felt like that we had actually arrived. I was never satisfied. And then I've left and I helped plant a church. And I started with no students, no kids. Now we grew over time, but we never grew to the same number or the same level as we were then. And it didn't really matter. And in some ways, honestly, that helped me be healthier in my own heart and in my own mind. And so what you realize over time is that the high highs don't really satisfy you and the low lows don't necessarily crush you. Jesus is the one that satisfies. And Jesus is the one that lifts you up and brings comfort when you fail. Obedience to Jesus is really what matters. Obedience to Jesus is where you actually find success. So just go and do that today. And I pray that you find your satisfaction and your comfort solely in Him. You don't worry too much about the accolades and achievements or the criticisms and the angry parents. Hey, if this was helpful in any way, please do subscribe. Let's continue the conversation. Drop a comment or leave a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. It really does help. And I'd be honored if you'd share it with somebody, a student pastor, a kids pastor, next gen leader who's maybe recently received an email or some criticism or a tough time, and help them as they learn to deal with it too. Hey, if you want to talk, you can always email me personally at brent@brentparsley.me. I'd love to read that email and respond to you. Or you can always DM me at Brent Parsley on Instagram. Hey, everybody, until next time, I really hope that today helps you win in Next Gen Ministry.